Thank you for tuning into the Uli Museum podcast. I'm Winnie Hour, your host. Today we're here with Kenneth Montague, who's going to talk to us about the exciting world of art collecting.
Hey,
Kenneth
how are you
is
doing?
Kenneth is a Toronto-based art collector and also the founder and director of Wedge Curatorial Projects, a non-profit organization which promotes alternative perspectives on community and culture. Thank you so much for joining today, Kenneth. How are you doing?
Just fine. Everything's great here in Toronto, and I wish you could see the beautiful sun, which you probably can't see because you're in London, where there is no sun. But
Do you
that's
know
not true.
what? Surprisingly, the sun has just come out.
Oh, I
So
stand
we've had
corrected. I
great
stand
weather over
corrected.
the weekend, and you could just see lots of people out in their shorts and lack of tops. So there you go.
Well, good for you. Good for you. It's actually Canada Day here, our national holiday. The
Oh,
yeah, July 1st, which is why I've got the red and white on our national colors. So.
happy
Right.
Canada Day. So what's the tradition? What do you do on Canada Day?
There's a big concert, a kind of Glastonbury, Woodstock kind of thing that's at on Capitol Hill and Parliament Hill, are sort of Parliament buildings in Ottawa, our
Okay.
capital city, and a lot of Toronto artists, musicians, and so forth will be taking part in that. We all watch it on television remotely. It's kind of become the sort of go-to event. But there's a lot going on in Toronto this weekend. It also happens to be Pride weekend, so there was a gay pride parade yesterday that the whole city took part in, and it's a month away from my wedding in Toronto, so lots is going on. Lots is
Sounds
happening.
sounds super exciting. Sounds very, very exciting. I wish I was in Toronto.
Yeah, which you were too.
So we would like to cover the what, the how, and the where of art collecting. So why don't we
Yes.
start with a bit of background? Do you remember the first piece you bought and why? Why did you purchase it?
Yeah, I do actually. In terms of serious art in the collection, and not just some little things that I might have picked up at the odd show when I was at university. I guess the first important piece was a photograph, and the photograph was by the African American artist James Van Der Zee, and it's that famous image of the couple in raccoon coats, and that's in Harlem on the Harlem Renaissance in the 1930s, and it's a photograph that I'd seen when I was a 10-year-old,
Oh
uh,
wow.
which was really great. I remember it from when I was a kid in Detroit. I was born and grew up in Windsor, which is the southernmost Canadian city, maybe 4 hours west of Toronto. My parents are Jamaican immigrants, and we sort of grew up like a little island. There were maybe one or two other Jamaican families in a city of over 100,000. And Detroit was this sort of bastion of black culture and Motown music, and into the 70s with the Black Power movement. And they had this great institution, Detroit Institute of Arts.
Yeah.
And yeah, we used to go over there. My father was studying, doing a master's in industrial arts. And my mom who was a dietitian, she would take us on her day off on a Saturday, and we'd all sit, like the three kids, in the library and, study things, or we'd go to see a sports event. And sometimes we'd go to that DIA and check whatever exhibition was on. And I can remember seeing that work, how it just spoke to me.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary. I mean, for a kid to see this thing and to kind of rethink Black American history. It was certainly not what I was learning at school, like seeing this impossibly sophisticated couple,
Absolutely.
in front of this brownstone with their beautiful car with the white wall tires. And for me, it was a new vision. It made me sort of dive into that focus, Black identity, with my art collection as time went on.
Okay. So so you noticed this photograph first time when you were 10 years old. So when did
Right.
you end up acquiring it? What was the time gap between the first time you saw it, fell in
Well,
love, and
well,
then the next time you saw it again and decided to
right, right.
buy
Well, when I was 12, no, that's not true. When I
it?
was yeah, when I was maybe 30, and a dentist in Toronto, I'd studied at University of Toronto, and had sort of worked the first 5 years or so building up a practice, and hadn't been collecting art yet. But I had an opportunity It was the late 90s, to sort of open a gallery in my home. We called it the Wedge Gallery because it was a wedge-shaped space, but also this double meaning. It was kind of intended for artists. I was trying to wedge into the mainstream of contemporary art. So it became this sort of well-known spot in Toronto that focused on artists that were exploring Black identity. And one of the first shows we had in 1999 was James Van Der Zee. We brought the work up from New York. His wife survived him, and we brought Donna Mussenden Van Der Zee to Toronto. I chose maybe 20 images from a catalog. We had them printed up. At that time, it was a commercial gallery, and I was actually selling work. And one that I bought for myself was that beautiful image of the couple in raccoon coats. So it kind of came around in a very organic way as I sort of moved into selling art and then ultimately into curatorial work and becoming an art collector myself.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. I, what I'm getting from that is it sounds to me that you obviously passion plays quite a huge role in what you choose to collect. What do you think is the best strategy in terms of collecting? I'm talking about having a passion for something that you've seen that's spoken to you versus investment.
That's a very good question. You have to take your collection seriously, and so you have to think about it from a monetary point of view. You can't be foolish with money, but on the other hand, that's never the first issue in my mind. It's never the first thing I think about. For me, it's purely passion, and I am the type of collector that still has early works that really don't have much monetary value, but they have a great deal of nostalgic importance for me. And I think that every object, every artwork you collect kind of builds on itself if you're passionate about it, and it becomes something that resonates with other objects and artifacts. And in the great kind of lineage of your collection, all of the works are important. It's a funny thing, this collecting for passion. It's got a knows no bounds, but you have to be, of course, tempering your collecting with the fact that you should be responsible about the money that you spend on art. So you have to do your research, but passion all the way is the number one for me. Not investment or financial issues around the work.
Okay. So then now we're on to the subject of money. What should so I'm looking at a budding art collector. What
Yes.
should be the average budget if you're looking to start a collection?
That's a tough one to start out. It really depends on your income level, but for the majority of people, when you're going to buy something that's original, you're going to have to jump into the 500 pounds and plus sort of range. So I would say that's probably where you start. And when you start getting up over 1,000 pounds, now we're talking about art that, in some ways, is going to have a certain level of quality, and
Mm-hmm.
there'd be a certain kind of let's call it a frame, not literally, but a frame within that work that is going to sort of position it higher than kind of a reproduction or something that you're going to see for sale at an IKEA. I mean, you're getting something that may be one of a kind in the world, if it's a painting or sculpture, and if it's a photograph, it's probably going to be a limited edition print. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to be prepared to spend at least 500 pounds to sort of move into that world. I think it's easy to start a collection with $100 to £100, and that's how I started. I started quite reasonably with work, but found very quickly within the first year or so that in jumping to that level of say 500 pounds, you're into something that's much more considered
I
in terms
see.
of how it's made, how it's presented. You're into work that might be at an exhibition or in a gallery system where there's some research behind it, some writing, critical writing, and you've got something that really has much more of a value. So yeah, that would be probably where I'd start, around 500 pounds for a serious attempt at getting into art collecting.
Okay. Sounds really really useful actually. Is it then just so then looking at kind of the fact that you need to almost ensure that you're making a considered purchase. Is it then
Yes.
important to choose a specific niche, as you've done with works focusing on Black identity and African diaspora, or is it all right to just have a general interest across a variety of areas?
Another good question. I would say that for myself and for most collectors that I know, it's important to have a focus in your collection, like to think about how the work builds on itself. And for that reason, I do think that a specific niche is important. I think that when you're kind of collecting all over the place, sometimes early on you're missing out on, the important storytelling around art. You're sort of kind of more motivated by strictly beauty or strictly price. And I think that these are not great indicators about something that's going to have meaning for you over the long term. For me, it's about representing yourself. This is the kind of collector I am. I'm looking for things that speak to me in a very personal way. So there's no way that I can collect outside of a niche. For me, it's about Black identity, and it's from my own search for self. So I would say that for myself and for a lot of young collectors, the collection will have more meaning for you if you kind of focus and make it a certain niche that speaks to you rather than just this is the hot thing, this is the trendy artist for this moment. I don't think that's a good way to go.
You've just kind of made the perfect segue into my next question. Are trends irrelevant then? A lot of people are talking about art originating from China. Should we all start learning about that and focusing on that? Or it sounds like from what you're saying that perhaps not.
Yeah, I really don't think so. I think that you collect what you love, and if it ends up that the artwork becomes something that people start talking about, you may find yourself suddenly, with a collection that other people find valuable. But if you yourself love the work from the start, I think it's all about believing in yourself. I mean, I'm going to say from personal experience, this is what happened to me. I was collecting identity art, which was really seen as something very gauche and sort of very 1980s, and the kind of artists early in my collection were like Glenn Ligon and people that from England like Joy Gregory and others that I think in a lot of ways the art market had sort of thought, oh, these artists are not doing anything anymore, they're past their prime. And very interestingly, just about 10 years into my collecting and sometime in the turn of the century and sort of moving into the new millennium, the art market started to catch the wave of all things African and diasporic, and suddenly stories of immigration and art that featured tropes of race and family and memory suddenly became talked about. And then in America, the new president ends up being African American, and suddenly there's a political aspect to this. And suddenly artwork like from West Africa, for instance, from the 50s, that was a big part of my early collection, Seydou Keita, Malik Sidibe, Samuel Fosso. Suddenly that work was really valuable. I was buying this work when it was very affordable, and I can remember the moment when it exponentially sort of shot up in value, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk about Africa. And the same thing happened for the work that was diasporic, like Joy Gregory and other works, that I had seen through Autograph and organizations like that in London. Work like that I bought early on, Horace Ove and Vanley Burke, Clement Cooper. Suddenly that work was really, really in vanguard again and talked about. And, I just think it's really funny to me because it always had meaning for me. It always had a special place for me about my own identity and thinking about the work through that filter. So it wouldn't really have mattered to me if the rest of the world never caught on. It is validating and it's great for the value of the collection, but really, it was a personal journey for me that the artwork provided, and the process, the search for it, the research around it, what I learned, the scholarship, has been enriching. And I don't think that it really, in the end, matters that much to me that suddenly, you're seen as an authority on black identity in contemporary art. Hey, it doesn't really matter in the end. I've got something that I've built up that enriched my life and hopefully will enrich the lives of others through our curatorial projects. It's not really about it. I caught the trend and isn't that great? I'm not really into that aspect of it.
I see, I see, I see. No, no, this makes it makes a lot of sense to me. As somebody who's looking at starting a collection, it
Right.
kind of just a lot of the times you read the Financial Times, they talk a lot more as art as an investment or as an asset, etc. And it can, once it has that kind of weight to it, it almost delays your activity because you want to make sure you're buying something that is going to make investment sense. But it's actually quite comforting, to hear your journey and to understand how it's just been for you a story almost, or perhaps a reflection of yourself. I imagine if you look at this over the years, it would be a brilliant story to tell the grandkids, eh?
I'll just work on having kids. Okay. Grandkids, we'll see how that goes. We're a
I
little
just I
far
just
off.
went for that one. I just went for that one.
You
So
did, you
so
did.
what else do you think a budding collector should consider?
Well, it really, really, I think, will have more resonance for you, as I've said, if it's a personal expression. So
Okay.
you have to, I think, have the fortitude to um, read the journals, look at the art magazines, read the blogs, go to the art fairs, but still resist the trend and try hard to sort of think about collecting objects that are going to have meaning for you over time, not in the year 2013, but moving through your life. Are you going to want to have a longer dialogue with that painting, with that photograph that you saw in that book or that journal, in that art show? Are you going to want to have that object in your home, in your life? Um, can you live without it? Is a question I always ask. You should sort of embrace that obsession to collect and have it a part of your life if you're feeling that burning desire. But you really have to walk away, and that's a very disciplined kind of maneuver. It's something that took me a lot of time, but to sort of go to an art fair like Art Basel Miami or to Frieze and see something that you love, but be able to just sort of walk away from that thing, think about it, yeah, and then sort of like do a little research and then get back to it rather than just going on that impulse. The impulse is good. It's what brings you to the table and kind of makes sure that you sort of are on the right track. But you can't jump the gun with something as sort of expensive as art. You have to really do a little research. If you lose the piece, there's always something else. All of us collectors, we all have great stories of, I could have bought that crystal Philly or I
Yeah.
could have grabbed that, blah, blah. And there's going to be another opportunity. I mean, I use that example because I can remember meeting Chris back at the end of the 90s, visiting a girlfriend in London who was at Chelsea. And, thinking to myself, geez, I'm looking at these extraordinary paintings. I hadn't really started collecting yet. This is maybe 1996.
Yeah.
I just was at that moment when I'm thinking, well, starting to buy photography. I'm going to be a photo collector. I don't really think about painting that much, even though my brain was saying, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm also thinking to myself, that elephant dung, that's going to smell up my apartment, It was like, you could have got something like affordably that's now, hundreds of thousands of pounds. And, it's funny, that you go on and you'll have many stories like that if you, follow that process of, I've got to think about it. And on the other hand, you really know when something's special. And I've learned how to balance that. Now, if I saw an artist on the caliber of a Chris O'Philly, because of the knowledge I have and the experience in terms of, just the eye that you kind of develop, I wouldn't let that go. I'd have to say, okay, I'll put this money down on this, reserve it for me, let me do some research rather than letting it go. I mean,
Okay.
there is a careful balance that you kind of learn over time, and that's the experience that you gain as a collector. It's not a process of just walking in, throwing money down. In fact, I think that that's been a real problem in terms of the art market and how it's been exploited, and in some ways doesn't really reflect reality. Sometimes money's just thrown at things without the consideration. So I don't really believe in that.
Okay. All right, great. This has been really good in terms of covering the what.
Good.
Let's look at the how.
Okay.
What sort of process do you follow before you buy? You touched a little bit on it when you spoke about, maybe perhaps putting down a deposit and going away to do your research. But is there anything else that you do in preparation before you acquire a new piece?
Yeah, great question. If I could sort of say summarize that answer, like summarize things into five sort of essential steps, I would say that firstly, you have to have that emotional response. So I would say the first step, surprisingly, is to kind of ask that question: can I live without this? If I moved on and I let this go, am I going to be regretting this? So the first thing is to really, really move past the, gee, that's beautiful, and wow, that's a really good value for that particular artist's work, and just think on a deeper level. Is this a artwork or an object that I can't live without? So that's the first thing. Like, is it special to you?
Okay.
So, and then secondly, you really do have to do some research. The best thing, if it's possible, is to actually meet the artist and do a studio visit. It's not always possible, but I found in building my collection, having a personal relationship with the artist is not only valuable in learning about that particular artwork, but it's enriching, and you start making deeper connections amongst the other artists and artworks in your collection. So having that personal having that personal connection to the artist, I think, is a valuable second step, if it's possible. And then thirdly, I feel like the research part really has to come into play now. So, that third step would be to start learning about the particular artwork, how it sort of relates to that artist's greater body of work. And you can do that these days so easily by visiting blogs and going to the history of the artist, just putting their name into Google and seeing what art shows they were involved with. Try to look for some critical writing about the work. And again, it's not about looking at it as a popularity contest. It's about, does this work have some sort of pedigree? Does it fit into the great scheme of things in terms of the direction of your own collection, in terms of where you want it to go, and in terms of the history of art? Is it important? Or is it something that is just a whim for you? And maybe that's something that you have to reconsider. So that third step about doing the research is critical. I think, fourthly, that it's time to start talking to, the person you're buying it from. And that's usually on the level of an art collector, the gallery, or the artist representative. And I try not to engage in that conversation right away. I try to do those first three steps so that I have a little bit of knowledge. So, you don't come across as being a complete novice and they won't take you seriously. Because, of course, there's that strange kind of culture of the art world where if you say the right things, and I'm not talking about the right verbiage, I'm really talking about if you appear to know a little bit about the artwork or the artist, suddenly the door is open and that person can really, really engage with you, take you a little more seriously, and might even, in the end, see that you're someone that they want to work with and may give you a discount on that artwork because they see that you're putting together a collection where it really fits and they don't want to lose that sort of opportunity. So I find that doing that research, doing those first three steps, and then getting in contact with the gallery is probably the best way to go.
Okay.
And and then finally, that last step in terms of the process of buying is really now looking at the monetary thing. And that requires another kind of research. This isn't about the scholarship around the work. This isn't about the pedigree. This is really now just like looking at it as an investment. That last step is where you sort of go, okay, I'm buying a painting from an artist like Lynette Yadamboachi or something. It's an example because she's someone whose work I bought several years ago from an art fair. And I could see the beauty in the work, and already she'd reached a level where things were selling out even that day. And then you have to really think, okay, is this the right price point and value for the work? It may be, it may not be. And you have to then make that decision. Can you wait and maybe get another work that's more appropriate to your budget or your collection now that you've seen that it's an artist who you love, who fits the rest of your collection? So that's the sort of part where, you've done a lot of research. You might even come to the art fair knowing this is the artist you want to collect. Okay. But then that last step is, do you put the green light on and do it, or do you really reconsider? Because sometimes prices are adjusted in a way at an art fair or an exhibition where things just might be a little bit higher price than you might get if you had taken your time, done a little research, walked into the gallery later. You might miss something, but you might gain something in terms of getting a better value and maybe another artwork that's more appropriate to your collection. So you have to think about the money part, but I put that at the very end. I put the passion, I put the research, I put the relationship with the artist, I put the relationship with the gallery ahead of looking at the price. So those are my 5 steps.
Brilliant. This is really good actually, because I had heard previously about what you spoke of in the emotional response and the research, but not so much around the impact of the prep that you do before you speak to the gallery owners or before you speak to the artist representatives. I think that's actually really, really good nuggets of information, and also kind of the steps around making a consideration around the monetary thing. Do you buy in the art fair, or do you wait and think about it and buy perhaps afterwards and pick up another piece of art that you may not have seen? I think that's actually that's a really good point. Do you think it's important to have an underlying knowledge of art or art history in doing all this?
That's a good question. Yes, I think there's a certain level of knowledge that you should come to the table with. I don't think that you should be getting into collecting in a serious way without doing a little bit of reading and gaining a little bit of knowledge around art history. And it could be as simple as taking a survey course, history of art, which I did many years ago. Though I'm a dentist, I sort of went back to university and did a night course just to sort of learn that kind of art history 101 that I never got when I was loading up my courses with science and so forth. So, yeah, for me, it was important to kind of know just the big picture on things. And I mean, that is in some ways a dangerous process because, as you know, a lot of the artists, for instance, in my collection around Black identity really weren't covered in a course like that. But it gave me a kind of a platform to sort of have kind of to be able to relate to certain periods and to see the significance of a contemporary piece, which is what I'm interested in.
Yes.
In the great history of Western art, the great history of Eastern art, the great history of kind of world art, politics, fashion, music. You can see how it all kind of comes together. And it's very helpful for you in terms of kind of like moving toward your own focus. You need to have that background of the big picture of where it's all coming from. So yeah, I think that's essential actually, like the underlying knowledge of art history. Now, a very specific period, I think that's only important maybe for a collector like myself who's focused on Black identity. I did need to delve in and learn some specific history around Africa, around, in particular, African Canadian culture. And for me, it was an important thing to learn also about the politics, the civil rights movement, the legacy of slavery. All these things kind of will then be important for you to have at hand in terms of looking and seeing the deeper meaning in art. When I think of artists in my collection like Kara Walker, or someone like Glenn Ligon, or an artist like Barclay Hendricks, if you don't really have that specific history, you're not really going to be able to see the significance of the tropes, ideas, the color, the subject matter, even the sometimes the scale of the work and why it fits into a particular series or body of work. I mean, you need to know why that artist made that choice, what's behind their own politics, and I think that having the history is essential for that process.
So it's not just trying to understand or interpret a particular piece of work on its own, but it's having the bigger picture to kind of almost bring the whole thing to life.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's really interesting. Actually, I was in a talk by a sculptor from Nigeria. His name is Fidelis Odogu, and he was speaking about how artists from Nigeria focus on telling stories, on using their work as statements, social statements. In some scenarios, even speaking up against the dynamics of say the government or the social scene or what's happening to people in terms of their lives or poverty or whatever. And I guess if you don't know all that, or if you're not from Nigeria, if you haven't read up, it can be a little bit misplaced. So I kind of see how
Yes.
that links together.
Agreed. And there's a danger to that because then you're sort of putting something maybe of yourself on the work, which might be fine, but maybe not what the artists themselves intended, and that's problematic when you have a collection and you're sort of maybe putting it through your own filter. That's fine, but you need to know what the original intent was, and then you can sort of do that kind of curatorial play where you say, okay, I bought this work because it relates to this in my collection, even though the artist's intent was blah blah. I think it's just important to know what was behind an artwork. You have to have the history for that.
Okay. And in terms of relationship with artists, do you always have studio visits, or is it just I suppose the age of the internet makes it a little bit easier to correspond with artists, but
Yeah,
is that
I
mandatory?
yeah, I think it's really important. Whenever possible, I try to connect with the artist, and you can do it more easily these days, even with Skype and with email. But I think when you can, having that connection with the artist makes the art more special for me, and I think that you also learn some things that you'll never read about. The very sort of fine print kind of history about the work, the interesting little anecdote that you can then discuss when you tour people through your collection or when you lend a work to an institution, as I do regularly with my wedge collection.
Yeah.
It's really great to know that the jacket that Jean-Michel Basquiat was wearing, in that image that was done by Van der Zee was not his jacket, but that Van der Zee was upset when he came in the studio to see this guy that was all rough looking with his hair looking all wild and had paint on him, was coming from his studio, and kind of in his generation, as an older African American, he thought, like, this ruffian is showing no respect coming to my studio to be shot here, and not so he had the guy that Jean-Michel was with, give him his jacket, and yeah, that's better. You put on a jacket as a prop, and come correct when you come to my studio. And you don't know those things until you talk to, in that case, the estate of the artist, the wife, and she told me that story. I mean, like, for me, understanding those little anecdotes makes you have a deeper appreciation of the work and actually adds to history and scholarship around the work.
It's brilliant. It sounds like it's so much more revealing.
Absolutely.
Yes, it makes I suppose the purchase a lot more valuable than if you
Yes,
were just buying it off the shelf in an art fair or in a gallery. So how many pieces do you typically acquire in a year?
oh, maybe 5 to 10, not 50 to 100 like some of these collectors. It's beyond my budget. Plus, you change as you get older and you begin to have a little more restraint. So yeah, I would say 5 significant works I might buy in a year now.
Okay. And has there been a change in your collecting habits in comparison to where you started? You mentioned that perhaps you're a little bit more considered now, but in terms of style or has there, if let's say I was looking at your collection to date, do you
Yes.
think I'll be able to discern a noticeable change from, say, when you bought your first couple with the raccoon versus now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Lots has changed. Even though I'm still working within this envelope, some would say a very narrow niche of Black identity. The work has changed considerably as I've evolved as a collector and curator. So, for instance, with photography, I used to buy very straight portraiture. In other words, those images that were early part of my collection from, say, West Africa, like Seydou Keita, that work's still very important and valuable to me. But I'm much more interested now in work that's more conceptual, and sometimes that extra layer of, of kind of, let's say, um, if you just hang on for a minute, Winnie, I'm going to just start that last part again.
Of course.
Sorry. So uh, I would say again that, as a collector, everything you collect is important throughout your evolution. But I personally can feel a great change that's happened from my early acquisitions to where I'm at now. And that change is really around, in the case of my collection, with Black identity being the focus, a move from very sort of straight on portraiture to more conceptual work. And I think that happens as you read more and more, in my case, around identity, and you start to think about the writings of, cultural theorists like people like Stuart Hall and so forth. It kind of moves you into a different frame of mind where, as a collector, you become interested in new ideas around art, and you can't help but start thinking more conceptually. So it affects what you're interested in as a collector, what you want to kind of live with, what you want to have a longer dialogue with. So for me, that's been a big change. Also, I feel like for me, I've evolved to a point where I try to buy less work, but with greater quality. So less quantity, more quality, and more bodies of work. In other words, I like to buy, if it's affordable, if I can do it, all 10 of those photographs. I think of kind of artwork that in photography you call a body of work, where you've got a series of work that's related. I used to only say buy one kind of image from that and think, okay, that's great. And I realized later, when you can, it's very important to the artist, to the storytelling, to the truth of the work, to try to acquire more than that one, but a series, and when possible, the entire body of work, because then you get the full story, and you also have to think about the legacy of the work. In a lot of ways, it was meant to be together. It's the way an institution would buy the work with their often unlimited budgets. For me, as a guy who is not a major collector but has a major interest and passion in the work, I sometimes wait now and will forego buying work that I think is okay, interesting, and wait for work that I think is absolutely killer, and wait for me to be in a point where I can afford to buy, all 10 of those photographs from that particular series. And then you really, really have something that enriches your collection and also has legacy, because one day you might be giving that to an institution, or in some ways kind of making that work kind of have a kind of a life beyond your own. And you want to have that work together whenever possible. I think it's a change that's a good thing, and comes with experience, and comes with obviously a certain income level where you kind of evolve to, okay, I'm ready to sort of make a major purchase of this entire body of work. I don't do that all the time. I can't afford to. but it's my goal now when it's something that I've researched and I've thought about. It's where I want to go. I want that whole story, not a little piece of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest change.
So you're maintaining or attempting to maintain the integrity of the work as it was intended.
Absolutely.
So let's talk where. What are the top 3 places you would recommend to budding collectors for acquiring new art?
The top 3 places. Well, certainly you got to think about exhibitions. And when I say that, I mean both public institutions, the Tate in New York, the Museum of Modern Art, the Met, the Whitney, the New Museum. Where I live in Toronto, the Power Plant Contemporary Gallery, the AGO, the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art. These are places that have really enriched my kind of process of seeing, my knowledge base. You get to see a lot of art in kind of one place and see when you look at the collection how it relates to other works. So I think that's an invaluable thing. As a collector, you have to gain knowledge, and you gain that knowledge for free by, or next to free by going to these institutions that are open to the public. Also, of course, there are, group shows that happen where you can sort of get a lot of work that might have meaning for you in one shot. I think of a show earlier this year in 2013 that was at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York called Blues for Smoke. And that show had work in it as diverse as paintings by Glenn Ligon and Barclay Hendricks. There were videos by Richard Pryor and even a newish hip-hop, post-hip-hop group from America called Shabazz Palaces that I'd only heard of sort of maybe tangentially. And after that, and being so riveted by a video I saw at an art show, I then bought an album, went online, saw some videos, and kind of got into a whole other way of thinking about hip-hop, for instance, from a show that was using blues as this sort of a major idea or trope to sort of look at the kind of, evolution of contemporary art, through the prism of the blues. And I mean, that's an enriching thing for a collector to see artists that are maybe in their own collection kind of arranged and put together in new ways, telling new stories. So for me, the museum experience is invaluable. I would say, the top 3 places, well, certainly the gallery system, and that includes commercial galleries as well, and those wonderful shows. Okay. But the second way would be online, and visiting the various art journals. There's so much you can get for free now by subscribing to, eFlux and, all the various, blogs and kind of well-curated kind of news items that are available for the taking. So that's been a great ongoing thing for myself and most collectors. But then thirdly, the top 3 places that I'd recommend, you'd have to then get out and go to art fairs. And art fairs are important, not so much for the social aspect, which you can get anywhere at any event, but it's more about seeing a whole lot of good stuff, sometimes bad stuff, but a lot of new work in one place. Catching kind of where the market is at, seeing where things are headed, and putting a kind of a value monetarily on your collection, which is important as you kind of evolve that collection. So I think it puts things in perspective going to an art fair. And there are special events that happen at art fairs like no other place, where you might see a performance piece from an artist who you love, or you may have that kind of confluence of music, fashion, and, say, contemporary art in an event that you still may be thinking about, months later. Art fairs are important for kind of the spectacle of contemporary art. So I have to say my top 3 would be visiting galleries, going online and using the resources that are available there, and then actually going to art fairs where you can see a lot under one sort of banner.
Okay, brilliant. Sounds like I'm going to be busy for the rest of the year.
But you
How
live in London where you can get it all and see it all, and a lot of that for free too. So you're in one of the great art cities on the globe.
you are so right, because every time I travel and I want to go to specific exhibitions, it always kind of I'm often taken aback when I realize it's actually quite expensive, and I'm actually spoilt in London.
Yeah.
So it appears it's at our doorstep over here. How about places to avoid? So I'm going to tell you a story. I was in Barcelona last month, and I saw the most striking work by an ink artist, a Catalonian artist.
Okay.
Gorgeous, really amazing. Reminded me of some of the stuff that Picasso was doing in his Cubism movement, and I bought it. It wasn't terribly expensive, but I loved it, and I went for it and I purchased it. I even practiced my Spanish in the process. But I got very excited, and I came back home, I started research and tried to find out information about the artist, but I couldn't find anything.
Right.
So I started to think, are flea markets not perhaps a good place to buy this kind of stuff?
That's a really tough question. Well, you're asking the wrong person because I kind of go everywhere, and I think it's all fair game. I mean, I have to tell you that I was asked to curate a show at the National Museum of Art in Durham, North Carolina. And my good friend Trevor Schoonmaker, who's a fantastic curator there, who's brought Barclay Hendricks into the world, and kind of positioned fellow Kuti as a important kind of artist, contemporary art, not just musician, and has done other great shows. He's the one that sort of pulled me into bringing a show that featured work from my collection into that great institution. And in that process of putting together a show, it was called Becoming, that featured work that was sort of thinking about Black identity in various kind of tropes and eras. I found that looking at my collection, that process was very valuable for me. And I started thinking, okay, you've got work that everybody knows about, that they're going to want to see, like work from Jamel Shabazz, or work from Zanelli Maholi and other artists who are sort of out there and bigger names. But I also had to say it was a time to look at some stuff that I bought at flea markets. I had work that was anonymous, an unknown photographer, but beautiful black and white images of African Americans kind of at work, at play, on Coney Island, at the Eiffel Tower, or kind of these photos that I bought at the Brooklyn Flea in New York for maybe $3 an image. That once you sort of kind of arrange them, clean them, frame them properly, told some really important stories that were essential for that particular show. I also saw work that were these old snapshots I got at a kind of a yard sale, that all it said in the photo album, this 1970s album, was Nassau 1973, and it was just snapshots of some women at a party. They were like maybe early 20s, hanging out. A couple of them had children. They were sitting on the bed, holding their babies, just doing stuff that made me think about my cousins in Jamaica, just hanging out in the 70s. And this photo album, I kind of opened out and put under a glass case, and just these vernacular photographs that were bought pretty much at flea markets and at yard sales had, I think, equally they had equal importance in terms of their value and their significance in that kind of storytelling on a show around being and becoming. So I would never discount the flea market in terms of purchases. Sometimes you find things that it's not so much like the Antiques Roadshow, like looking for that $1 million vase. It's more about work that really may not have a sort of obvious value, but in the context of your own collection, it becomes really important. Just a week ago in Toronto, at a flea market called the Junction Flea on the west side of Toronto, a monthly event, I found a photo card, like an old kind of postcard
Yeah.
image that had it was actually the actual photographs of a criminal. So it was from the Kentucky criminal system, and it was like a mugshot of a convict. So the frontal shot and then the sort of side view. And I have some of these that I bought at auction from the Texas prison system of these young black men, and their hair is sort of coming up in a kind of a comb like a rooster. And it sort of was this look at the time of the sort of tough guy criminal look, the way maybe now it's, drooped pants and sort of, a do-rag or whatever the prison look is at the time. So it's interesting to see how that kind of prison, not fashion, but the sort of way one would present themselves for that tough guy look kind of changed over the years. Then I saw this image at the Junction Flea in Toronto the other day that was super cheap. I mean, I paid $5 for this image, and it was a photograph of, a white guy at the same era, and a lot like Elvis, he had his hair done in that same way, sort of, I'm going to be like the tough black guys that are in prison, and it really, you can sort of tell these stories and put things together, in your own collection, acquiring work from a source like a flea market. So I got to say, don't look past anything. Don't discount things. It's all in the mix.
Okay. Really good. Really, really good. So we've covered, we've covered the gallery system, research with art journals, art fairs, and of course, flea markets. Are there any other resources? Have we left any stone unturned?
Well, I'm an old school guy. I mean, I like newspapers, and I have to say, one of my great pleasures in my life over many years, since I was a young guy at university, has been, reading that New York Times every Sunday. I mean, here in North America, that's like a tradition for us, and you've got your great newspapers in London as well. And I do enjoy Observer and the Independent and other British journals, but I have to say, the consistent quality of the writing around art in the New York Times has been a great thing, kind of waiting for that moment on Sundays where you sort of look at a particular artist and get a kind of an overview. And then from there, I might get on my computer and dive in and start learning a little bit more. And ultimately, you might buy some journals or critical writing around that artist. But it's a great place to start. I also think that there are certain art journals and magazines that have remained excellent in their quality, even as magazines and publishing is sort of going on the wane. Magazines like Art Forum and Frieze, for instance, from London, I get monthly, and I think they've been enriching and continue to really be a great critical voice in contemporary art. And, finally, I have to say, you kind of have a responsibility as a collector to, I think, to share your knowledge and in some ways be influential and promote the artists in your collection, not for the value for your collection, just because they're important to you and you think these artists should be important to others. So I'm always promoting artists who I love when I'm on committees and various kind of organizations. Lately, I was asked by the Tate to be on their Africa Acquisitions Committee, which is a great honor and also a great opportunity to share knowledge about my beloved African-Canadian artists and to learn about other kind of African diasporic artists and traditions. So, we have a yearly meeting outside of London. We have one during Frieze in October in London, but also, in a country of our choice in Africa, we'll meet. So we were in March of 2013 in Lagos and had an opportunity to do artist visits. I met people like Bruce Anobrekpeya and doing studio visits with incredible artists like himself, and meeting great collectors like Kavita Shelaram and seeing their homes. I mean, this was a kind of a great thing for a collector to sort of, see what happens in other places, how other people think about putting together their collections, to, learn about art in a very visceral way like that. And again, a week in a country isn't going to tell you everything, but it certainly puts you on a path of discovery where then it's up to you to do more research. For instance, I then went and bought work from some of the artists who I'd met. I also, am considering doing a show here in Toronto with contemporary Nigerian artists, and these ideas weren't in my head until I saw firsthand what was out there. And you don't get those experiences without putting yourself out a bit. So that, at an art fair, I met the curators at the Tate, who then were introduced to my collection and then contacted me and said, hey, we'd like you to be part of this. So that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone to a particular art fair. These things are important. It's all coming around in a circle as you sort of move through your own journey with contemporary art.
Amazing stuff. I'm beaming when you mentioned Lagos. What did you think of Lagos?
Oh, I loved Legos. I mean, for me, there was a certain familiarity being of Jamaican descent and spending so many summers growing up in Jamaica. You really see that not everything was lost in that, terrible story of slavery. So many Jamaicans carry with them expressions, body language, traditions, even I think in some ways a kind of a philosophy that comes from our ancestors who are mostly from West Africa. So I saw, when I went to the marketplace, scenes that were wildly familiar to me, going to the marketplace in Kingston, Jamaica. So for me, making that connection in a very kind of honest and visceral way with Nigeria and Jamaica was really important for me, and an eye opener. And then further than that, it was incredible to see some of the contemporary works that are coming out of Nigeria that I thought, blew away a lot of the stuff that I see, happening in Canada. So we get very insular in our own countries, thinking, oh, yeah, we're on top of it here. And then you go to a place like Lagos, which is just, an incredibly vibrant and sophisticated city, and you think, wow, we don't have anything on this place. So, I mean, I saw, art, fashion, music, and in some ways even kind of like social kind of events that kind of moved me and made me think, this is really a city of the future. And I think that, personally, I have a love of giant cities, mega cities like Lagos and Mexico City. And I'd been to Mumbai with my fiance the year before, and there were some comparisons I could make with a city of that scale. And you start seeing, the highs are so high and the lows are so low in terms of how people live, with money, in poverty, how, traffic becomes this sort of great equalizer, between rich and poor people, how you just have to kind of move through, a place and it can't not affect you. You really felt that the people I met in Nigeria that were from Lagos traveled at a different speed than the people I met from the country. It was kind of a real eye opener and reminded me that, great cities, have their own kind of culture. Some of it is just based on the size of a place and how people have to interact. So I loved Lagos, and I'm eager to get back there and, delve into it a little deeper.
Amazing. And I hope we can connect when you're back in Lagos. Just
Yes.
to finish off, and along the lines of what you've just been saying, a friend of mine, he's German and he recently moved back to Nigeria, or rather not moved back, he moved to Nigeria
Right.
to pursue a business which he set up with a friend. He describes getting off the plane at Lagos as being alive. So
Yeah.
I think that that's a suitable place, a suitable junction to end our call today. Thank you so much. I feel like I've been enriched with information. I am sure that the subscribers of ulimuseum.com will find this super helpful and inspirational in kickstarting their own personal collection. So thank you so much. Really appreciative.
You're most welcome, Winnie. I enjoyed speaking with you, and I look forward to big things from Uli Museum. Uli Museum forever.
Yay!
That's it.
Thank you.